Hey everybody. So welcome to our class on power belting. Super awesome skill to have. It's something that a lot of people think of immediately when they think of like learning how to sing well. I think of it as kind of like a trick, and ultimately it feels like this really intense sort of sound. You make a big sound, but it's usually where people get into trouble with their voice. So it's one of those things that we have to be very cautious about how we approach and how we develop in our voice. So if you're new to singing, I don't recommend like just immediately jumping into belting as a practice unless you understand some of the fundamental skills of your voice and also just vocal control in general. If you have a lot of murky sensations, belting is something that's not going to come across very well. And you're going to usually harm yourself, right? So the trick is like the name power belting is misleading. It's what the effect is and what people hear and experience. But I think when people think of like power, they think of like often like bearing down and creating all this weight. Um, and usually that causes people to flinch. So when I think of power belting, I don't think of it as this big of a thing, really. It's actually really important to like not give it too much weight and importance. Like it's this really hard, intensive skill. It's something you have to be careful about. Again, you want to be training, and condition your voice to be able to do it. Uh, but it's ultimately lighter than people would think in terms of the sensation. When you're creating a lot of energy, you want to make sure that that energy is leaving your body and not getting stuck and sort of backing up. And the problem is with our voice, if we carry any tension up into our higher register, we are going to have problems pretty quickly. So that's sort of the thing is like it's like landing on like your ankle in a funny way. Hey, I miss you too. That's great. So yeah, this is I think a really important skill to understand, and again, people give it too much importance. And again, I think that's because it's like exciting, exhilarating. I mean, it's we just had the holidays. It's a great way to blow off some steam, is to do like a big sing. But just remember that that's the sensation of the intensity is for the audience and not in your body. So you actually want to think of it as like the exact opposite. I almost like kind of flinch thinking about like power belting. It's like power yoga or something. It's kind of like missing the point. And a lot of times people are over engaging. So the first thing that we want to talk about with belting in general is that it's a mixed voice technique. It's more about placement than the power. You want, with support, when we think of our breath support, we want to be connected to our breath support. Breath support mainly means like if we're not creating good lower abdominal connection with our breath, we're going to start to create pressure with these muscles around our larynx and our shoulders, and we're going to start to get into these awkward positions. That's actually the most important thing about support. And when we're belting, it's actually like you need less breath than you would think. First of all, that's something that I think a lot of like classical musicians get wrong about this is they try to take this really big full breath. It's a mixed voice technique, so it's just highly pressurized, but it's not something that we need to like really like lurch or thrust into our lower abdominal muscles. That's actually often going to cause more pressing and more weight than we need. So first of all, what do I mean by power belt? Let me just like back up a little bit because like what's different from power belting compared to like regular belting? Not much, except for the fact that I think of like power belting as uh, sustaining and adding some vibrato and kind of living in that tessitura for longer with multiple words. So it's just like when we get to sort of like the more extreme concepts of belting. So it's more about the like sustaining into a belt. And so there are some important things we need. We have to understand our light mix. We have to understand what mixed voice is in general, and then slowly add concepts of chest voice. We have to know how to drop into vibrato. This is really important because we need to be able to disperse the pressure. That's like a safety hatch in a lot of ways. So you'll listen to like a lot of rock singers and you'll realize actually that they do use a good amount of vibrato in certain situations. It's healthy. It's how our larynx protects itself. Um, and then we also have to understand like, yeah, concepts of sustain. And then also probably the biggest thing is muscle isolation and tension release. So belters in general tend to develop a lot of weird tension and a lot of not just like the vocal folds, but like your tongue and your jaw, especially the tongue and jaw. Those are things that we try to create stability with. And again, belting should feel like light and clean and neat at first. That's the healthiest way to do it, and then you can kind of like learn how to like add into it. But with anyone who sings like it's funny, like saying heavy metal and like rock and things like that. The technique is actually very light, and that's when we're adding even grit into our voice, which is something that I'm not like a huge expert on because I tend to do more clean tone singing. Uh, when you do that kind of stuff, what I've heard from all of the experts is that it's much lighter and it's more about placement. So we just need to balance out these different variables and forces in our with our vocal technique. Um, so let's first start with the light mix. I'll do some exercises for this. It's basically our ability to make the resonant changes from chest voice to head voice. And again, registration, like chest voice and head voice, is more of a teaching metaphor. It's more complex about how our resonance is and sort of the positioning of our vowel shapes. And how our vocal folds are getting into the right kinds of positions. So it's again also a way that our body releases pressure. So we get like thick vocal fold sensation with chest voice, and then it gets thinner and thinner as we go up into head voice. And we want to be able to just find a nice balance between these two things. So when we think like chest and head voice, we're thinking too much in like a binary, like this is one thing and this is the other thing. Mixed voice is just a fancy way of saying that it's all one voice, and we have to make this smooth transition with our placement. So the sensation of placement can be different for different people. Sometimes we talk about like the mask. Sometimes we talk about the sort of back of the vocal tract. I think it's really important to mention that when we're trying to make a big sound, we want all of the resonance. So when people, I think, sometimes think like, well, I need more twang, that actually causes us to usually make adjustments with our alignment. Like I'm going to push into my face, and that's actually not helpful. You want to think of it like a ping ponging from the front of your face to the back. And so when we're in a belt, a lot of times people again try to kind of go this way. I talk about like galloping with the horse, like you kind of get off of it and sort of follow it this way. And what you need to do is be able to kind of ride it and keep it more neutral. So the concept of having everything be really neutral is important. Um, so let's talk about the light mix thing. So basically, like the way that I always do this is I use vowels for the path of least resistance. So going from like ah to e or oo up to an e vowel. Thinking about something where I'm not trying to increase the volume. Again, as we go higher, we sometimes think about like I need to sing louder. And what that usually does is it makes us push. And loudness is more about resonance too. So when you're singing higher, it's going to carry. Um, yeah, and it's really important to note that like when we practice this stuff, like I'm going to talk a lot about the prep, and then we'll get into the sort of sensation of it. We get kind of like fixated on like singing high notes, and we tend to just do them over and over again. Do some reps, pay attention to what it feels like. Take a moment and pause and reset, do cool downs. Do this throughout the day. Give yourself big breaks. Do a little bit and then come back to it the next day and the next day. The worst thing you can do is just kind of beat it until, over the head. Like uh, you're going to fatigue yourself more because you're singing higher up and you're purposefully adding a little bit of vocal fold thickness, right? So again, we start from a light mix and then we learn how to get a little bit more of a sort of brassy sound, how we kind of expand the vowels a little bit. Every vowel, you want to make sure that you're not over enunciating when you're in a sort of a belt position. It should feel floppy. And like vowel modification, it should feel like a little wider usually. Um, Yeah. So the the important thing to note too is like I think everybody can find their belt sound. I think some people prefer it more than others. So if you're someone who tends to like live up in head voice a little more, I would just do like in general more chest voice work, but like it's gonna be a little less accessible. But what I would say is that like people's belts are in different places. So you kind of have to find where you fall into that position. But again, the biggest thing is that people tend to over sing when they're thinking about belting, and you don't really want to think about like pushing your sound out. It's more about the placement. But yes, when you do this, like there's a certain level of like fatigue that is going to be inherent when you're singing uh with like more force. So really again the concept of belting is to try to eliminate as much of that force and still have the sensation or the sound and effect of belting. But this is why you want to do it in little bursts at a time, and weight train up to songs. Find where your sweet spot is. It's not going to be necessarily where an original is. Like someone's really belting very well on a certain note, that may not be the note for you. So we have to find all sorts of kinds of modifications to make this work. And yeah, you're gonna feel some like what I would say is like some warmth is okay. And you want to make sure you do cool downs. You must stay hydrated, all of these other things that are involved with vocal health. But this is where like vocal health comes into the conversation for sure, is when people start talking about belting, when they're dealing with what we consider sort of like extremes. Although I think of this as kind of the middle of the voice, actually, is a good way of explaining it. So if you're not familiar with your head voice, it's going to feel like the top of your voice, and that's a problem. Thus, we come back to this light mix concept. So first thing, as I always do, is we need to be able to keep our jaw, our head, and our neck loose as we go from an ah to an e. So going like ah, ah. Now, an exercise I really like that helps us sort of control our chest voice, because we need to learn how to incrementally add sensation of chest voice into our sound, is to do this one, which is the Zufuya exercise. It's funny when we just talk about vowels. So I'm going like Zufuya. And what I'm trying to do is actually maintain this sort of level alignment. I'm not trying to go zoo and kind of push forward, but zoo. There's that moment of ooh, that in between place where I'm about to switch, but I can feel the sort of height of the vowel is what's really important in this kind of exercise. So again, like allow yourself to just move freely, be flexible, put your hands on things, never wrench or hold things, but like Zufia. See if you can do it, keeping all of this pretty light. And again, play around with it because it's going to feel different in different places. So, Zufia. So I'm allowing any place where I feel something holding to kind of what I call waterfall it, which is allow it to kind of gently release as we go from note to note. So, so that's really, really important to be able to find your light mix, which is my ability to be up in this sort of belt range, but sing lighter, right? So being like, dee. Sometimes I'll do this right, like, nani, 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 I kind of go up like that. Nani, 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 It's more about the middle note, where we find this sort of weird, tall, kind of under enunciated E vowel, like nani, 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 nani. So we need that. We also need to make sure that we stay connected to our breath support. Often it's not about strength of breath support, but just connection. So we often like lose our connection as we go up from one note to the next. So I like to do like octave jumps for this. So thinking like going like one. This is going to be a through line. Thinking about sort of leaning and sliding up into a high note is really great. Keeping it moving, because we want to be careful about thinking about anything that where we have a sustain as too static. It's always moving somewhere. so we don't lock up. And that's going to be a big problem. Whenever we lock up, all the energy gets stuck in our body. So we're trying to feel that connection to our lower abdominal muscles, right down here, going like, whoa. And it doesn't have to be forceful. It just has to feel connected, like it's leaning out a little bit or expanding. Whoa. Don't let any of this follow it. So, whoa. Right. So the sensation that I get is it kind of goes up and back. We want that feeling first. So I think one of the mistakes sometimes we make with belting is people tell you so much about the sensation of the mask that's really important. It's actually kind of, for me, feels like above the mask. So like through here on, maybe you could think of like this whole area, like through your eyes, through your forehead. Um, but we really get there first by having this backspace open, so we can get that sort of ping ponging. And again, it's really all like back here, but that's where we feel the sensation of the resonance sometimes is in our face and our head. That's all kind of more sympathetic perception of resonance. Again, it's really all happening in our vocal tract with the vocal folds in the right position and our vowel shapes, making sure that our tongue and our jaw don't root down, because that's going to create too much of a backup of pressure, and it's going to cause a muting of the resonance, which causes us to force our sound. It's like a vicious cycle. So again, you want to make sure you know how to stay connected to your breath support. Feel sort of the back of your vocal tract. So doing like NG sounds, right? Going like, right, and taking that up higher. So like, right, so my tongue is coming up to the back. I'm trying to make sure that this area doesn't follow it. No, no. That's actually already starting to be a little bit of that feeling. And then as we go up, for me, like this starts to happen a little bit higher. So don't like, just like as don't imitate exactly. Don't try this at home, kids. No, don't imitate exactly where I'm doing this. You have to find it in your voice. And I think that's where a lot of the mistakes happen too, is you're going to imitate where I found it in my voice, and that may not be the right place for you. And so it might happen a little bit lower. Certainly for some of my higher vocalists, it's going to happen a little bit higher. Us tenors sort of sit in the middle, again, between like some of our lower vocalists, like baritones and baritenors, and our altos. I find that like I kind of, tenor and alto are kind of like almost interchangeable terms in a lot of ways. So like where this kind of happens to me around like an F above middle C to G, and then really starts to heat up around G sharp and A. Uh, that's actually where a lot of altos start to feel it. But like the majority of like belters in the higher like upper voice singers are going to be like B flats, Bs, and then Cs being like, there's some famous songs where there's belting up to Cs and C sharps. Think like Whitney Houston stuff, some musical theater songs, right? A lot of musical theater singers who do belting all the time are always living in sort of a mixed voice placement. So it often goes from this feeling of like being like, and I'm up in this place and talking like it's, what about the magical moment I just experienced? And they're in that sort of place. And, that sounds like something. And then they're going up, into the sort of belt later. And it's really just a change of resonance. So those are some of the things we need to think about. We need to think about our light mix, being able to find that first. And then we can start to play around with the belt. We need to think about adding in breath support connection, making sure we just sort of catch that coordination as we go up. Again, practicing kind of sliding up to these notes can be really helpful, as long as you're not carrying the weight or trying to like manipulate your alignment. And then the other thing is vibrato. So make sure that you can feel vibrato. I think it's really important to be able to do that. These are all safety hatches, like your ability to disperse pressure. That's how our body naturally does it. So, take some time and just feel out your vibrato. Make sure it's nice and full and your tongue is relaxed. We'll get to tension release in a second. So doing like, way, yeah. What do you mean? What do you think is the problem? Um, I'm curious. Oh, okay. Your message retracted. That's okay. There's people have various issues with this, and that's why it's good to have a teacher sort of pay attention to where you're holding tension. It's important to note some other things too, like how you stand and how your what your relationship to the ground is really important. So sometimes we're sort of like ungrounded. And it's not that we have to like hook in or like have a wide stance. That actually usually means that you're in sort of like a defensive mode and you're more likely to flinch. But it's really just like your feeling of balance. So sometimes like moving your legs back and forth, like lifting a leg and playing around with your balance a little bit, it can be really helpful to reset this. Um, so like, when you're gripping down, that tends to be the biggest problem. So again, yeah, play around with vibratos, make sure that's nice and comfortable. So like I'll use lots of glides for this. So going like way, ya, these kinds of things like way, ya, ya, ah, ah. Right. Go towards some classical feeling. Again, belting and classical are kind of like two sides of the same coin. And some people that sounds like sacrilegious. But I sing lots of classical. It's kind of like just the way you think about it and sort of your tone quality. There are, famous opera singers who they do their analysis, like Pavarotti, things like that, and they're like, that kind of sounds a little closer to belting in some situations. Again, so I think sometimes people over fixate on like twang in the mask or like cluster formant resonance, right? All these technical terms for where we get our resonance. Let both things happen. Find your vibrato. So again, your ability to slide up to something and be like, because vibrato naturally helps us feel some of those higher overtones. That's sort of how it works. And if you can't get those higher overtones, it's usually because something is blocking it. This leads us to working with tension release. So again, one of the major barriers to belting is the tongue and then also the jaw. So practice like rolling your R's if that's something that you can't do. It's actually really helpful. When we talk about the tongue too, we think a lot about the external tongue part that we see, the tip. Then there's the heel, this back position. That's where we do a lot of vowel shaping. And then there's this whole area down here, the root that's connecting to our larynx. So you want to be really mindful of this area. So I do exercises just to feel that this isn't super tight. So again, you can roll your R's. You can be like, and feel the vibration kind of moving through the entire mechanism. Um, any of these kinds of things where we like controlled snoring, these kinds of things are helpful just to shake and loosen up the space. So like one's ingressive and the other is exhaling, right? So ingressive means I'm I'm breathing in as that's happening, and then yes, okay, much better. Yeah, so that's sometimes I have to like when someone's asking like what is exactly the problem, that's where we have to listen to it, see it, to understand sort of what's happening. Sometimes it's like the way that we're approaching it in our mind. We flinch just last second, but our technique is good and our voice is healthy. Sometimes it has to do with some of these tension points. So like feel for tongue tension. Um, so when we have trouble projecting our voice, it's usually a resonance that's being blocked. That's kind of the way I think about it. And then we feel like we have to force the resonance by like pushing. And so again, like when you find like a good belt, it should feel kind of almost as light as the other ways that you sing. In some ways, it's actually easier to hold a long note in a belt because we're letting out less air. So it's more pressurized. But yeah, again, we want this area to feel just as loose in a belt as it is in any other part of our voice. And that's, I think, the difficulty. So pay attention to things that you're holding. If you're like, going up into a position, like you'll see that like even when I, do belting, sometimes there's a temptation to want to do that. And I like work against it, make sure that I can move freely at the same time. But I often find that the tongue tends to be one of the major offenders for when people have difficulty projecting. The tongue just starts to root down as we engaging our voice, and that starts to kind of block the vibrato. It blocks a lot of these things. So yeah, practice like rolling your R's for a little bit until it feels a little warm. So going like can you do mixing as you do rolling your tongue? Can you actually make pitch and go from chest to head voice? So like it's the weirdest thing, right? Again, singing teachers, you're like, these people are crazy. All the really great singers I know are people who are willing to experiment with sounds and being mindful of how it feels. So not just like randomly, but making funny sounds until you can really get a sense of how you form all of these shapes. So practice rolling your tongue. That's kind of keeping it moving and flexible. The other one is practicing keeping your tongue just kind of neutral. So this is like I often work on rounding vowels, going from like A to O, like ah to O, and trying to keep my tongue neutral and just feel when it's engaging, so I can become more aware of when it's rooting down or pulling back. And you can watch yourself in a mirror. So again, I'll do these kinds of exercises, like so like wah, whoa. Like you might make some weird sounds, but practice trying to get your tongue out further than you're used to, like kind of over your bottom teeth. Again, this is not necessarily how we want to sing, but it can help us just feel what it's like to get the tongue out of the way and be like, whoa, way, whoa, 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 whoa. You saw for a second there, mine wanted to pull back, readjusted it. So all of these things are really helpful. Sometimes when people say like keep your tongue flat, I think they're trying to say keep your tongue relaxed. Um, and it's dangerous when you say keep your tongue flat because then you might be holding it, which is kind of defeats the point again. Um, so these are all these kinds of things. Make sure you have breath support. Make sure you have the ability to sing in a light mix around where you're going to do your belting. So again, like if I'm up here on a G and I'm like, if I want to go for a belt, one thing, if I'm going like this, I don't have a sense of my head voice. So I want to feel again coming down from head voice, like ooh, 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 yeah, 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 yeah. I have to be able to sing like that up there first before I can do any sort of belting. So once we get that feeling, then what I recommend is start kind of somewhere a little bit below where your belting is. Don't try to like make yourself louder. It's already going to get loud once you hit the sweet spot. And then just practice kind of sliding up to this position. So I'm going to use like an ah vowel, and then it's going to start to go a little more towards ah. And I'm going to start to feel a little bit of this sort of stretch out the back molars. That's the concept of letting your jaw relax. So there's one of the things with the jaw tension is if your jaw kind of locks, you may not be able to get the right kind of negaphoning position. We don't need to stretch past our range of motion. It'll just feel a little bit like a snake kind of feeling out your back molars, like that. I'm sure you've probably seen videos of people showing this kind of a thing. Don't think straight down. Think of it as extending out that way. And we want the jaw to just get out of the way. So if we're trying to over enunciate the vowel shape, that's going to be a problem. Um, yes. And then, okay, this is a really good one too before we get into the actual belting. Yay, all the setup for singing in a healthy way. And then there's like a moment of showing it off. So we're talking, the other question here is tightening up the abdomen. So getting a steady flow and connecting to your breath support without flexing your upper abs. So that's the other thing is when people do belting, they tend to think of like, what's my chest voice? So I should like bear down or hold my chest and squeeze and also flex the abs. It's the wrong area. We want to deal with the lower abdominal muscles. And again, breath support is not as intense as people think it is. It's more about coordination. So one thing you can actually do is practice just gently sort of pressing this area as you sing. So going, I might do the slides again, like octave things, and go like wah, wah. And it might come out a little bit, but you never want it to feel like it's super hard. So that's again sort of a weird thing about all of it. So and also I just practice sort of like moving around my axis a little bit. So whoa, that kind of a thing. Um, and then the other one is to practice using some SOVTs. So this is like the sustain part of the practice, if you want to think about it that way. So doing things where you're like, no, 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 no. So what I'll do is I'll do multiple pulses of an N, thinking about moving through them rather than just sort of sitting static. So everything is always moving in a direction. So maybe I'll do like 5 of them and I'll be like, no, 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 no. This is a sensation of sort of like driving your breath support. Again, I'm never like pushing, but it's a feeling of sort of singing through notes. They're always going somewhere. So when even like a big belt, think of it as just like the top of a parabola and you're just kind of like singing through it to some other note. So it's funny, like the best belts are the ones where we don't think about the belt, but we think about where the belt is headed. Is kind of like a funny way of sounds very like wise, right? Like it's the journey that counts. So don't over fixate on like just trying to sit on the note. Think of it as always a kind of like a flow through it. So this is why I do like kind of sliding up into these notes. So I might do like a Y and go like, you know, whoa. And then you're going to start to notice this like extending out and coming up and over. So this is still kind of low for where it would be for me. Like, whoa. Right. I thought extension, that's an F. Like, whoa. And then I'm going to start as I go up higher. I might start thinking about adding vibrato, things like that. Whoa. Again, trying to keep this all neutral. Whoa. It's like back behind the eyes, right? Whoa. And then I can kind of just sit there like, whoa. Whoa. You see my eyes want to move, right? So that's the other thing is like your focus. Like I sometimes want to look up to the left. And so I want to break that and be like, whoa, whoa. And again, not force, but positioning. So that time I felt like I was a little under it, created a little extra stretch. And I started, this is a high A up here again. So once you get the feeling, whoa, I can just kind of be there. And again, it's not about force as much as people would think. So first I should be able to, na, 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 I should feel all of those sort of different changes of like, ee, yeah, ah, just hanging in that position. So once you've got that feeling, then you can start to kind of feel out things. So like, one public domain song that's kind of common for this is like House of the Rising Sun. You just have to be careful how you play it. So like, I would weight train this. So if like, again, like you don't have to do it in the, yeah, did you feel that? That's good, right? It's very, the sound is intense. And the speaker might be like lowering the volume as this happens, but you'll hear that sort of kickback of the resonance. It's really more of a position and placement than it is actually the force. So you should be able to just like at any moment, like, yeah, but I have to be in the position, like, and just kind of sit there, right? So that's the temptation. Again, if you're doing any of these kinds of things, take it to a point where it's low enough where you don't have to flinch, and we're all human. Like, you'll notice even I'm doing this on camera, which is like makes it almost harder in some ways. Like, I don't want to like look at people or know that I'm being recorded because that makes us think about it more. But like, like you'll notice like I'll do that little thing where I might go up and my shoulder might go. It's probably because this side of my body, it like subconsciously feels weaker than the other side. And so there's a lack of trust there. So that's where I would like sort of play around with balance. And like, if I weren't sitting, I would like probably practice changing balancing from one leg to the other and then try to sing lighter and lighter in that same position. So I might like, wah, wah, ah, and just see if I can like, ah, just sit there like that, right? And, move around like, wah, ah, ah. And again, I'm using, I maybe went that way. So, wah, ah. Yeah, and I broke it, right? So I was moving this way. This was trying to move. So I went the other direction and actually felt like I got more sound and more connection. So again, this is what's so funny about belting is it's like in the moment, if you think about it and you flinch, you're going to block like one whole side of your face. There's also people who will like use like tuning forks and like put vibration on one side. Like one side of your body might be like a little bit more asleep in terms of the nervous system. And you just have to like keep working on lighting it up. This is why sometimes I'll do like tapping, these things that seem like, what's that going to do? It's actually working the sensation so that I'm more aware of where my body is and what's happening. And just that awareness will actually change your ability to belt. There's other ones like you'll notice sometimes like I do this too. We're all guilty of these things of like singing high. We think of like lifting and then our eyebrows come up and stuff like that, or maybe they come down and they start to flex. This is also part of our nervous system. So practice like put some shades on. This is why do people close their eyes when they sing sometimes, right? It's like we're changing our sort of sensation. When we're nervous, we get really sensitive to light. And so what happens is like sometimes we start to flex these things. And then there's actually muscles that connect to our larynx that kind of pull it up a little bit past where we want it to be. The larynx should just be kind of free floating. It might sit a little higher when we belt and mainly kind of like, you'll notice that little like stretch that I'm doing. Right, that's like the larynx. The muscles that make our vocal folds sort of pull away actually kind of pull back a little bit. And so that's that sort of feeling of out the back molars a little bit. And that actually helps get our vocal folds in the right position. So it's funny, again, when people talk about oversimplifying things and they're like, larynx must be high, the larynx must be low. It's always just like the brain, left brain and right brain. It's always just an oversimplification of the sensations and really follow your sensations first and foremost. Teachers can help you notice things subconsciously that you might be doing that you don't notice, right? And that's part of it. So play around with these things, experiment. Like I'll do this in like a really dark room in the shower. That sometimes that's like the best is like in the bathtub. It's like the weirdest thing, and you're just like you're relaxed. And the lights are dim, so you're not flinching or flexing anything here. And if you can just save that feeling and then be like in that sensation when you sing, it's like we're like the trained eagles or something. You have to like cover our eyes so that we can like show our tricks, right? Um, we have to sort of learn how to do that. And I just remember I used to carry so much weight up into this part of my voice because I just like thought belting had to be something more than it is. Like, don't give it that much power. It's power belting, right? Don't give it that much power in terms of like what you think it should feel like. I think that's one of the biggest things that helped me get this. So then we get to like, okay, what happens when we're like singing through all these words? I have to keep that space open. So like, here's the like, let me do it like, I'm gonna change the key here. Let's do it like G minor. Again, you might start this a little bit lower or higher, probably lower. Depends on the vocalist. So the first part of this is like, there is a house in New Orleans. That's kind of like find your light mix, right? There is a house in New Orleans. This is all setting me up. And then I get to this spot. And I might go like, there are, they cover us in sun. Like, that's actually like a little too low for where my voice is, right? I can do it, but it's not They call the rising sun. So I'm gonna go up a little higher. Like, there is a house in New Orleans. They call the rising sun. I found it, right? My eyes went to the back of my head. They call the rising sun. And then we got all these words. And it's been the ruin of many poor boy. And it's been the ruin. So one thing that's important to note is not every word has to be like exactly the same amount. And I'll practice this concept of kind of pulsing in and out of the belt. So like the feeling is like going like, yeah, because a lot of times when we're singing, we're like, and it's been the ruin of many poor boy and me, oh God, and one. It's just that spot, right? They call the rising sun. And then maybe I'll go a little higher, right? And just keep playing with it. So there is a house in New Orleans. They call the rising sun. And be like, whoa, they call the rising sun. And I just keep trying to find that back sort of placement and sort of sitting like that. So that's kind of how I would say you can feel all of that. And then you can play around with like, okay, how much do I lean into it? How much vibrato do I do? But I'd recommend like first just like let the whole thing operate. So like, whoa, oh, they call the rising sun. All right, so I'm just like finding that sweet spot and then just kind of popping back up into it, right? So plan your song appropriately for that. Yeah, hopefully you're starting to hear that again. Like, also, like, it's nice to do this in a reverberant room, but you might start to get your ears ringing a little bit. So, like, I have like some sheets in here that like block the resonance that's like directly behind me in this wall, things like that that are going to really help. And again, after you've done that a couple times and you find those bursts, like, you might find like there's some weight. Like, there are a couple of those times where I came up and like, got a little stuck in certain places. Like, I promise you the best way to do this is to like take a break. Don't just keep trying to push through it. Like, come back to it and then go through your cycle of like, can I find my light mix? Can I be like, "Ah, na can I sit up in that spot and be like, na 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 na, they call the rising sun. Sometimes when I go like and work on belting, it in turn helps me with the feeling of effortless light mixing, like up in this area. So I'm like, they call the rising, they call the rising sun. Where I can feel this sort of like, oh, they call the rising sun. And it's been the ruin of many poor boy. Right, I can find if I can sing it like that. They call the rising sun, and it's been the ruin of many poor boy. Right, it's like, is that chest voice? Is it head voice? It feels lighter than chest voice to me, but it doesn't feel like it's just head voice, right? I'm not like, they call the rising sun. Different feeling, right? So you want to be able to hit all of these marks before you just go to like shouting, right? Because if you just go with your chest voice and you haven't trained your ability to like let your vocal folds make these changes, you're more likely to like shout. And shouting is like an overload of pressure, right? You're carrying the wrong format too high, and carrying the weight up is what we would sort of say. That's something you want to uh, be careful about. So if you don't know how to do light mix, that's what makes me think that you're probably going to hurt yourself. If you can't do vibrato, it means that something is probably holding. You can't get enough space, release, breath pressure. So, go through that kind of stuff. I might come back and be like, whoa. It's like I can feel it. Okay, little tongue tension. Whoa, 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 whoa. I might work on like rolling my tongue a little bit more. Be like, and then I would let my voice rest for a bit and come back to it. Is this making sense? Do you guys have questions, by the way? Is that I don't know if it's necessarily translating all the way through through the speaker because sometimes the it'll like if I check my audio settings, it really like lowered it a lot as I did this. Um, but again, I want to unveil like practicing belting is not what you think. It's more about body awareness and sort of where tension and pressure is backing up, finding that lightness and then slowly adding things on and then stopping and like paying attention to like, okay, I just put my voice through some gauntlet. It was vibrating really quickly, right? With a good amount of pressure. So how does that feel? A little laryngeal massage. Here's like the cough reflex. So if this area is really tight, you might be doing some stuff with your clavicle, your sternum, that area. Keep this loose. Practice this like upside down. I mean, or like on the floor. This kind of stuff is actually really helpful to sort of change the way that you think about it. So like laying on the floor, putting your, like leaning against a wall, so that you can feel if you're starting to come out of alignment. Putting your hand here. Practice putting some shades on as you sing. Go somewhere where you're not being listened to and record yourself, right? And see if you can get the same sound with a lighter and lighter feeling. So like I might come back to this and be like, they call the rising sun, and it's been the ruin of many poor boy, and me, oh God, am one. And then from there, if I can sing it really light like that, then I could like mess with it. I could maybe like purposefully start to kind of shape it a little bit as long as I have that back placement like relaxed enough. Like I could start to maybe add some grit or like purposefully kind of drive my breath support a little bit more into it. But first, feel the lightest belt that you can, because chances are it's probably a lot louder than you think it is once you get the placement. So there's this feeling again of like unhinging back here that I think is really important. I think sliding up to it's really helpful. So that's why I do like you know, why? That feeling of why? Don't let yourself follow it. Sing through it like why? Why? And see if you can keep your breath support there. So sometimes these slower ones are kind of hard because you lose connection to your breath support and then you start squeezing. So these rapid sort of slides up like whoa, whoa, position of tongue. Yeah. And again, this is why I kind of preface with this in the beginning. Like when you're setting your voice to doing this kind of stuff, it's gonna shock it a little bit at first. Like that's just the truth. Like we're athletes, and so we are conditioning our muscles. So you have to be careful about this, and do it in little bursts. Like if you're feeling it in your throat a little too much, take a break, you know, go like stretch on the floor for a while, go take a walk. Don't try to do it. Don't talk. Just like let your face hang neutral and then come back to it like a few hours later and you'll thank me because that's when you really find it and then save that feeling and just do it a couple times and then like go away and come back to it. This is like how I prepare for like a performance of doing this. If I just sat in my room and like try to belt over and over again and then went to go perform, my throat would like close up at that point. Like it's just like I've over exhausted myself. I ran a marathon before running the marathon, right? So you test it out, you rest your voice. Your voice is going to go through sort of repair moments. So it's like you'll feel uh, maybe it'll feel like a little overly warmed up and start to sound a little like frayed, like this kind of a thing. Again, take a break. That means that it's just starting to get a little irritated and it's getting soft. And wait some time because the the tissue gets soft. It goes into a different sort of mode. So that's why we have to have off days when we're practicing like strength and conditioning. So like it would do this, kind of have a burst of it. Then I would come back maybe like in a day or two, and I would try to find resonance again first. So just making sure that my vocal folds can like easily have clean tone without like force. So I'd be like back here and like ya ya wa 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 ya 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 wa. If I can get that ring in the sound, that's a sign that my voice is like doing okay. And then pay attention to like your voice pulling up from your low notes, so doing cool downs. So I might take some time and be like, "Wah," feeling like being on ground level of like, "Wah." I might sit down here and be like, "Yo, wow, yeah, 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 wow, wow." Get comfortable, sort of letting my voice sit again, finding the ground level, and then kind of trying to sing from there, so that you're not thinking of high notes as high notes. Again, we get sort of stuck in sort of overdrive, and that affects the rest of our voice. Then we're too tight with the other parts of our voice, and then we're overly exhausted by the time we come to actual belting. Um, so less is more. That's kind of the key to this whole thing. Find lightness, and then you'll start to make that sort of big megaphone sound. And what's funny again is people talk about the mask. Like I'll feel that sort of angling of resonance has a lot to do with the palate on the jaw, but I'm also feeling it like a lot out the back of my head too. So like, don't close that self part of you off, thinking like it has to be just only forward. I think you want to feel that sort of sucking up sensation as well, so it can sort of do the full ping ponging. Right, we're just kind of creating this open space, and we're not getting out of alignment with our vocal folds. Right, so when we pull like this, we're pulling to a not ideal position that our body doesn't want to be in with the vocal folds. And that's where it often breaks down. And if you feel that discomfort, do not push through it. Stop. So if I'm up here and I'm like, this is why I was doing this in little bursts, like, wah, wah. If I'm like, and stuff, wah, stop. Wah, ah, ah. And you just see if you can get there with little bursts before you actually start to lean into it, and allow yourself to come off the voice rather quickly. Don't try to fight your way through it. That's going to be a big problem. And then you're just training like a lot of weight into the sound. So that's kind of the idea. And then there's like an emotional aspect to it, which is just like float through it, like let the power of it kind of move through your body. Uh, it's for the audience to feel, not for yourself to feel. Uh, and so just like let you feel grounded. Don't overthink it. Don't try to take like a breath that's different from your other breaths. Just like breathe from your belly as normal. And yeah, ah, and then just think you're in that spot. So these little bursts are actually really helpful. And then you start to kind of string them together. You might try different vowel shapes, like ah, 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 ee, ah, and see if you can kind of move through them all. And it's like, oh, it starts to sound like weirdly kind of like classical, but it's not, right? It's a little bit more intense, a little more strident than probably what we'd want in a lot of moments. But again, two sides of the same coin. So it's like your extreme singing, right? Where you have massive projection. There's often like a little bit of a lower larynx position that people will do for the classical kind of a sound. But again, that's sort of that area, right? And that's like for me, it's like G sharps, A's, B flats because it's a high tenor. That G. It's pretty basically like a F sharp and above is kind of like where I start to feel that change, but it's a little different from day to day. Um, yeah, and again, like, be careful about trying this a lot. Like, there's already a good amount of singing for that, and then, like, I would come back to it. I would be able to see if I can just do it, like, on command, warm up a little bit, but then just try to do it one time. And then once you can start to do that, like, really quickly on command, that's when you're performance ready for a belt moment, I think is just when you can, like, a flip of a switch, be like, "And now I'm in belt position." Right, it's more the position. So it's the setup rather than the force. So I'm in like I remember where the position is. Yeah, ah, 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 ah. Where I could start to lean into it more. Be like, "Wah, ah," and then you could just kind of sit there forever. And then at that point, it's like, okay, that's like a loud, slightly annoying sound. But I'm just sort of demonstrating again, like when you actually find the position and there's stability in the vocal mechanism, you can kind of be there all day. I can just kind of sit there and just be like, ah. And then the other thing I would say is once you get the right positioning, see if you can let everything else sort of drape and relax around it. Just, again, that's sort of where I feel it's best. So, like, I might find that I'm doing something that I think is helping the belt happen. I've got the stability and I let everything else sort of drop. So again, I might be like, ah, and be like, oh, here's that. Ah, and like, oh, it's like my chest was like trying to lift and trying to engage into it. So again, that's sound. You eventually you're kind of like a rocker, right? And you're like, ah, right? That's sort of the idea. Um, and then from there, again, apply it to your songs. See if you can find moments of it where we come into a belt and then we come out of it and we go through the rest of our song. So oftentimes, like the longer we sustain, the more dangerous it is. It's like holding a really heavy weight, right? You don't want things to lock. You want to be like in this process and learn how to keep it there, but keep it still active and moving, and then bring it back down. Um, so as you do this, just like put your hands in different places, experiment. And again, any note that you belt on, like this B flat, I should be able to go like, "Ee, ah, ya, ya, ah, eh." It feels something like that, like, ya, 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 ya. So you might notice as I go up here, as I'm up to a B flat, it's starting to sound more head voice dominant. That's okay too. So where your belt is in different places in your voice, it's going to be a little bit of a different strategy. So we're getting close to the end. Again, ask me questions. I'm kind of just going off. Good. I'm glad this makes sense. I just want to demystify the belt and what like power sounds like. It's an exciting trick to be able to do. You have to be careful about it, because you can hurt your voice as you do this. You want to make sure you do regular conditioning before you just jump into this. I've seen some like voice training stuff where they just go straight into like bringing your chest voice up as high as possible and like into the belt. And I just think that that's like the wrong approach. Personally, as like a teacher, I think we teach from head voice down actually, and then understand how sort of the belt comes into it. So as we go up higher, like this is like for all of you like super high tenors out there, and then also for my upper voiced singers like mezzos, altos, things like that. Once we get up to like B's, C's, and C sharps, we're in a kind of a different place of mix. The position is different every few notes or so. So up here, it's more head voice actually. So that's where we want to learn supported head voice and be like, you can see I got in kind of a similar position, but the tier of overtone is like higher. This is where I do that sort of like the whine kind of a sound where we're like, "Wah, ah." It sounds like a helium balloon just goes like, kind of like that. That's like for that super, super high tippy top. It keeps going back, right? So it's all a spectrum. It's not just like once you find your belt, that's like, oh, that's the spot that I need to do. It keeps changing with each note. There's a slightly different positioning. This one is closer to head voice, right? Right. And the trick is when you learn how to connect all these dots together, you fool people. So if I'm like, I can get like into this place where it just seems like my voice just kind of keeps going up and it's an extension of my like speech voice. People talk about this sounds like a whining baby. That's because that's kind of like that is what we're kind of drawing off of a sound that we've all made before actually when our vocal folds were very small and elastic. We're kind of we can do this, right? It's like the imitation of the sound of that cry. The, ah, ah! Again, make sure there's some activity in your belly. You're breathing from your belly. Good, good. Hopefully, this is making sense. And this is the part where people are like, "That's like what we all want are these moments of belting." I remember my teacher said this really important thing, which was when you have problems with a high note, or you're trying to sing a high note, check the note before. Check the note before. So it's all about the process. That's why I spent like the first 30 minutes explaining the process, 40 minutes, a little bit of a song moment, and then some of these extended techniques as it sort of changes up. This is kind of how I imitate sometimes, like singing like an Adele thing or like a super high belty thing. Is like I'm in head voice a little bit more, where you might actually be doing the bell. It's almost easier in some ways for me in that concept. So I can be like, "Ah, ah," I could just sit there and be like so loud because it's actually lighter because of where it is. So again, fools people a little bit. Um, but yeah, the again, this concept is more about placement. It's actually understanding how to isolate the variables with your voice, know when they're starting to cross, and just be careful. Be careful again with this. Like I've definitely caused myself to like cough. I felt like ooh, like I did that a little wrong. I need to rest my voice. These are like extended tricks. So we learn to smooth them all together. So a high note is only as valuable as how you get there in a song. So you want to that's kind of the trick of it is like if I could just hit high notes and only do that, that it would be like kind of easy. The hard thing is like singing a song and then fooling people's ears and going into that position and like coming back out of it to the point where they just think it's just an extension again of your like it's all one voice, right? So yeah, quick question. Um, oh, what am I repositioning? So this is like if you think of it like it's kind of like the whole mechanism is connected. So really, it's this feeling of the pharynx extending, the jaw relaxing, the tongue feeling draped and maybe a little bit forward. So I'm actually clearing space back here more than anything else. And then once I have that space clear back there, the extension is from you'll see the extension from the front. But people often think too much about trying to control everything from here. It's got to be from the inside out. Is kind of the way I think about it. So I'm another one is like my teacher would talk about. It's like that concept or that feeling of like when you're about to throw up. This like sort of like release of these muscles. It feels like more autonomic. That's really helpful. So it's like everything is repositioning. That's when they put like electrodes on people and they see them prepare to sing a high note or things like that, they'll see all these tiny little micro movements. So that's why this is like you have to feel your way through it. Finding this position is the hardest part. That's why we need help with the teacher. And then once you find it, you can find it again, and et cetera, et cetera. That's why I say like do little bursts. And sometimes it's like if you've done all this good work and you get that feeling, I'm like, okay, stop there. Don't go on. Stop there. Let your body process that. Come back to it. Like I think that's sometimes the most helpful thing is people will like get it and then they're like, I got it. And it's like the goose and the golden egg kind of a thing. And they keep trying to get more and more and more. And then they've messed up their voice. And all they remember is the strain actually. Um, so it's lighter than you'd think. Um, there is some messiness to this. I remember also another I'm full of anecdotes today. Like I remember this like Heldon tenor guy came to one of our like vocal forum things and he was just talking about like cuz Heldon tenor, think of like these Wagnerian kind of tenors. They do kind of a lot of that sort of intense it's basically like a form of belting but just very covered. Um uh they like he was like singing is a sweaty, messy business, and I just like loved holding on to that. It's not like as careful. There's other ones like sing like a pig, like which I think is funny too. Thinking of all the tenors who are like kind of squealing away. But really about the whole concept is like don't try to be so like precious, like holding it and positioning just perfectly because you're probably gonna lock. It's more just about getting out of the way, not fighting it, but making sure that you're not getting out of the way by changing your alignment because this actually feels like we're getting out of the way, but we're actually closing off the space, right? It's all back here. So we're extending and stretching. So I think out the back molars a little bit, drop of the jaw, release of the tongue, and I feel the vibration sort of continue to pass. that inertance force, that vibration is what kind of keeps the space open too. So there's this sensation of like, don't like place it, kind of prepare the way, and then once you initiate the sound, the push of the swing is your breath pressure, right? That's sort of like the initiation of the vocal folds. It catches that wave and it immediately holds the space open. So that's maybe like a overly verbose way of explaining it, but again, this is I think part of it is like paving the way for how we feel these sensations. That's all perceptive language, so it might be different for different people. Um, Matching it up with voice science, knowing that people used to think belting was like a unhealthy, dangerous technique. That was like classical singers were like avoid belting. They were saying avoid shouting. Shouting is actually harmful. That's when we force resonance and we squeeze things. We want to reduce the pressure. Belting is not an unhealthy way of singing. There are plenty of people who do it all the time, right? And if you have a microphone, you can even fool people's ear even more and sing very light and still get the same kind of sensation. So singers were kind of like magicians, right? We distract people. We try to like hide our skill set so that people don't notice that we're like doing stuff, and we've often prepared it way in advance to the point where like when we're like messing with people and we're showing all these magic tricks, like we've practiced it a million times to the point where like they don't, it's so fast, it's seamless, right? That's the game. So if you have to do this big, long sort of like warm up to trust that you're going to sing in the right place before performance, you've often oversung. You've got to do that. Find your voice in other times when you have space away from performing. So you can like rest, you don't have to push it. Uh, and then you get better at doing that faster on command. And oftentimes then I'm just like warmed up in season and I'm not thinking about it. I'm just like letting my body do the thing and paying attention to like things that are not good feeling sensations, right? Things that hurt. If they hurt, then I'm doing it wrong and I need to go back to the drawing board, right? And if I feel like I'm forcing it or pushing, it shouldn't be that taxing, actually. It should feel like it's like I'm blowing off some steam, right? Um, so yeah, do some research, like look up some stuff about resonance and formants. There's some really great teachers who talk about belting and also like the mind aspect of it, the mind body connection, subconscious things, balance, what I was talking about, right? The way that our eyes are working, all of those things affect it. So sometimes people will like track things with their eyes as they're singing. They'll like put vibrational things on their face to like have better sensation and awareness. You'll switch your center of gravity. All of these things are really helpful to break you out of your habits and your misconceptions as to how it should feel. Uh, Discover how it feels. And then once you find that, then you save that feeling. So as always, it's a pleasure, and looking forward to next time. I think next time we're like doing a full 180. I think I'm talking about like ear training and like a cappella singing. In spirit of if you're like a caroler or like you're ever in like a quartet, you're singing a cappella. There's some fundamental skills that are really helpful. Just especially coming up into the season. That's when sometimes we do some of these things that we're not used to. And yeah, so I'll see y'all next week. I'm glad that was helpful and I didn't blow your ears off. And yeah, look forward to it. And as always, thanks for listening and watching. So take care, everyone. I'll see you next time.